I'm not sure which of these comics to sell and which one to keep. And so today I'm going to tell you about the pros and cons of each choice so that you can help me to decide. But first, I want to talk a little bit about how I even got these comics. So, a couple of weeks ago, I came across someone looking to sell some comics that they had inherited from their uncle, and they offered me these four for $100. Now, what are they? Well, first of all, we have the Sentry #1, which of course is the first appearance of the Sentry, and then we have not one, but two copies of Futurama #1, which of course is the first appearance of all the characters from that TV show. And then finally, we have Futurama #2. Now, if you watch this channel, you know that as much as possible, I try to get this hobby to pay for itself. And so my plan in buying these was knowing that each of these three books I could probably get about $50 each for, and I could probably get about $15 or $20 for this one. And so my plan is to sell the Futurama #2, and then certainly one of these two copies. But now I'm torn because I can sell one more of these and basically break even, and then I can keep the other one and add it to my personal collection. So, do I keep the Futurama or do I keep the Sentry? What should I do? Now, the reason that I'm thinking about holding on to this Futurama is that since it's based off a hit TV series, then it appeals to a larger audience than just the regular comic book community. In other words, there are people out there that don't normally buy comic books, but if they learn about this book or come across it on eBay, they might start to think to themselves, well, I'm a big fan of Bender. I think it would be really cool to own this book. And so this means, of course, then there are more potential buyers, which of course means there's a greater demand for this book, which helps drive up its value. Now, another reason why I'm thinking about holding on to this Futurama is since I believe a lot of people who have bought it are not regular comic book collectors, then I think there's a good chance, and this is just speculation, that this book has not been preserved as well as other comic books. Because, of course, us regular collectors, whenever we buy a comic, we're quick to bag and board it. But if you're just a casual fan of this show and you just bought it because you thought it'd be cool to have a Futurama book, well, you might just put this in a pile with other books and you might treat it kind of nicely. But over time, it gets a little ding here and a little ding there. And after years and years of that, then the supply of high-grade copies of this book just goes lower and lower. And of course, as the supply goes down, that means the values go up. Now, the third reason that I'm thinking about holding on to this Futurama is because, of course, it contains the first appearance of multiple characters, which, first of all, I just think is super cool. I love collecting first appearances, and so a book that has multiple first appearances is just right up my alley. But secondly, it means that it has a greater chance to hold value over the long term. Because if any of these characters remain popular 20, 30 years from now, then this book is going to increase in value, even if people don't end up caring about the other characters in it. But this also brings me to the biggest downside of this book, is that there's no guarantee that anybody's going to care about any of Futurama 20 years from now, right? If there's a reboot of this series, then the opposite could hold true. 10 years from now, they repeat Futurama. Man, maybe it brings in a whole new segment of people who want this book and it goes to the moon. But if that doesn't happen, 20 years from now, does anybody care about Bender anymore? I don't know. And if people stop caring about these characters, then of course they stop caring about this book, and then its value crumbles and goes to zero. Now, this brings me to one of the reasons why I'm thinking about keeping the Sentry. And that's because compared to the Futurama characters, I believe it's much more likely that people will care about this character 20 to 30 years from now, because Marvel is certainly going to continue to produce their stories and most likely are going to continue to include stories with the Sentry in it. And this will especially be true is if he ends up being a hit in the MCU, because it's very likely that he's going to be in the upcoming Thunderbolts movie. We know there's a character named Bob who is like the human aspect of the Sentry, and it hasn't been 100% confirmed, but we all kind of know that he's going to be in the Thunderbolts movie. And if he's popular there, then all of a sudden this character gets brought into the mainstream, and this book could really go up in value. Because I think if you ask the typical person on the street, hey, what's the superhero Sentry all about? They would be like, who? I've never heard of that dude. Well, that can all change after the Thunderbolts. And if it does, this book, again, could maintain real long-term value. But even if he's just moderately successful in that movie, then certainly I think Marvel will still continue to use him in stories for years and years and years to come, which is going to keep this character relevant, which is going to keep demand up for this character, which could help it maintain its value over the long run. Now, another reason why I want to hold on to this book is because compared to other Marvel comics, at least, it had a very low print run. Obviously, that means there's a lower supply compared to the first appearances of other modern characters, which obviously helps this book to hold on to its value in the long term. Now, I think the biggest con when it comes to this book is that it's possible a lot of its current value may be tied up into speculation about this character coming to the MCU. And so what happens after that Thunderbolts movie? When there's no more speculation to be had, does this book tank? Because that certainly happened to other characters when they've shown up in the MCU. I mean, think of Marvel Special Edition number 15, first appearance of Shang-Chi. Man, after that movie, that book, crumbled. Could that happen to this book as well? I think there's a decent chance that that could happen. And so, again, there's good reasons to hold on to this book. And then there's some reasons to be nervous about holding on to this book. I mean, hey, maybe I just should sell everything. No, not going to do that. Going to hold on to one of these books. Which brings me to what could be a third option. Maybe, just maybe, since I'm going to be breaking even no matter which of these two more expensive books that I sell, then I should say, who cares about the value of the book that I keep? Just keep whichever one of these books that I personally enjoy the most. It's basically free to me. I mean, there's the labor involved, but I'm not going to be putting any real money of my own into whatever book I keep. So just keep what makes me happy. Now, there's actually a fourth option. Perhaps I should listen to some of you and take a good hard look in the mirror and say, hey, it's time to be a true collector, wahoo. And of course, a true collector never sells any of his comic books. And so resist the temptation to be a dirty flipper like my boy Darth Lopez, and instead treasure every one of these books and hide them away in your attic like a greedy miser. Now, obviously I'm being a little facetious there, and I certainly don't think anyone needs to sell any comic books. But I always want to be an advocate for those who are flippers like myself. Just looking at this deal, the reason that I think it's good for me to be flipping some of these books is, first of all, it's going to allow me to add one cool book to my collection. One of these two will be mine. And I got mouths to feed. I can't just go out and buy comics without any regard to my financial situation. So the only reason that I can really build my collection is by selling some of my comics to help fund. Now, not everybody is in that situation. If you aren't, God bless you. Again, no one needs to sell comic books, but I need to if I'm going to add some more to my collection. Now, also, the reason why it's good for me to be flipping these books, in my opinion, is because I'm helping other collectors get books they love. I mean, I certainly don't need 2 copies of this, even if I end up keeping one. And so why don't I send it to someone? Obviously, they're going to pay me, but get into the hands of someone else who loves this show and will look at it and they'll treasure it. It's so much better to spread the joy of Futurama or whatever it might be than just to keep it all for myself. Once again, If you've got multiple copies of a book, God bless you. I'm not, hopefully this is clear. I'm not speaking against anyone who's doing things differently than me. I'm just sharing why I think selling comics doesn't mean you're some kind of fake collector or something like that. And the third reason is, if I were flipping these comics, of course, then I couldn't buy any of them. And this poor girl who had this collection that she doesn't really care about, would rather have had the $100, she would be out of luck. She would just have this box of books in her house that don't really mean anything to her. I mean, maybe there's some sentimental value that they belong to her uncle, but overall, it's just stuff in her house. But instead, she now has $100 that she can use to help her in whatever her life is. And she also, we emailed back and forth a little bit. And I know it meant a lot to her to have someone that she knew would appreciate at least some of these books, and especially the one that I'll keep. And it made her feel good to be able to sell those books. But you tell me what you think. Should I keep my Futurama #1? Should I keep the Sentry #1? Should I just keep whatever the heck makes me happier? Or should I maintain my collecting street cred, even though it might damage my marriage and send me to the poorhouse, and keep them all, but know deep in my heart that I'm a true collector? If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do so now. Like, comment, thank you.